everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Creating Synergy podcast. My name is Daniel Franco, and today we have a truly remarkable guest with us, Shaun Westcott, the CEO of Mitsubishi Motors Australia. Now, I've known Shaun for quite some time, having collaborated on some projects with Mitsubishi, but I must confess I was a little nervous about this conversation, as Shaun is not only just an exceptional leader, he is a profound thinker. The speed in which he learns and his ability to retain information is like no one else I've ever seen before. And Shaun's journey is fascinating. Born and raised in South Africa, Shaun shares with us his learnings from the South African military, where he rose through the ranks at a rapid speed to the corporate world, dealing with HR and IR issues where some people in his company were beheaded. Yes, you heard me correctly, beheaded for breaking a working strike. So from here, we deep dive into his time in various senior leadership roles at Coca-Cola before he shares stories of true innovation and thought leadership in his role as CEO at AC Whitcher, a forestry company that he turned into a global powerhouse, all in the midst of the 2008 global financial crisis. We learn Shaun's process to think outside the box and pivot into areas in which the market demands. It's a no-frills approach, but astonishingly effective. In 2017, Shaun, his wife, and his two daughters picked up their lives and headed for South Australia, to which they now call home, after experiencing a traumatic event when shopping at a department store where some thugs walked in with automatic rifles and started shooting up the place, with bullets ricocheting past his two daughters and wife. It was that moment they decided they needed to leave South Africa. After landing here in South Australia in Adelaide, Shaun held the role of CEO at HMPS, a robotics company, before deciding to take on a role as director in after sales at Mitsubishi, and within the next 12 months was promoted to the CEO role of Mitsubishi Australia, the fastest ever promotion to CEO in Mitsubishi Australia history. His leadership has seen Mitsubishi Australia become a world leader across the whole company. So throughout this chat, you'll learn Shaun's leadership philosophy and his approach to large-scale transformation and high-performing cultures, his insights on the future of the automotive industry, and his vision for electric cars, and how he balances the relentless demand of being a CEO with family and personal well-being. This was an absolute epic conversation with so many pearls of wisdom. So without further ado, let's dive into the world of Shaun Westcott. So welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. Today we have a really remarkable human being, Mr. Shaun Westcott, CEO of Mitsubishi. Welcome, Shaun.
Thank you, Daniel. Great to be here with you.
Look, we've known each other for quite some time now, and we know we've done a little bit of work with you guys at Mitsubishi. And I must say, I've been very excited, but I'm very nervous about today's conversation. You are an exceptional leader, and I feel like I've got to lift my game a little bit to even be on this table with you. So really looking forward to deep diving further into your story.
Thank you, Daniel. You're very complimentary.
So, for us to understand who is Shaun Westcott, we have to understand your earliest context. Yes. So are you able to sort of give us a little bit of understanding about your earliest context, your early life, your childhood life, and how you eventually came to sit in front of us today?
Thank you, Daniel. Yes, so my roots are South African.
Yep.
I was born in South Africa, raised in South Africa. My dad was a farmer, so I grew up on a farm, experiencing the freedom and the liberties of growing up on a farm and having the most glorious childhood you can imagine.
What were you farming?
So my dad was principally a dairy farmer,
Yep.
but then we grew a lot of crops as well. So he diversified over a period of time into sheep and
Yep.
also cattle eventually.
Yep.
And then we put in a lot of irrigation for the pastures, for the cattle, and extended that eventually into vegetable farming. So we did a lot of diversified farming over an extended period of time. Yeah.
Excellent. And so what else? So where in your younger years is there anything that you look back on and you think about that makes you smile and memories that you look fondly on?
Yes, I guess, and creating the relevance for where I'm at Mitsubishi today, I grew up on a farm, driving four-wheel drives, driving tractors, driving motorbikes, exploring freedom, having that sense of adventure.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if life's come full circle, and I've come back to being at Mitsubishi.
Yeah.
And we sell SUVs and 4x4s,
Yeah.
and we sell vehicles that give you that freedom to enjoy adventure. So it's almost like life has come a full circle.
Yeah, very good. So you are a bit of an adrenaline junkie, from my understanding too, aren't you? You've skydiving and rally driving and all this sort of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what sort of appeals to you about the opportunity to kill yourself? Okay, because I am petrified of skydiving. Yeah. I stay heavy, so I can't go do it. Apparently, there's a weight limit. Yeah, that's my excuse.
So I guess also to say that it's not only skydiving, it's also scuba diving. So
okay, you go under
it's
as
below
well.
the surface as well.
I must admit, I do enjoy the scuba diving. I went for the first time a couple of months ago with my kids, and it was real fun. But so the adrenaline,
yeah, it's the adrenaline, and I guess I'm a kind of person that enjoy stimulation.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking for something new and something exciting and something adventurous to do.
Yeah.
So that's just the way I'm hardwired.
What's next on the bucket list?
Well, bucket list of the things that I haven't done. I've climbed Kilimanjaro. I've scuba dived. I've scuba dived in some of the best places in the world. I've done a lot of that type of stuff, but on the bucket list that I haven't done yet is a visit to the Antarctica. So that is still on the bucket list.
Oh yeah, wow, that'd be amazing. Yeah. A lot of white.
A lot of white, but also that the majestic, uninhabited, the ice, the animals. It's fantastic.
100%.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
100%. So you mentioned your dad there, and your mother? What did she do? Was she just working on the farm as well?
She was working on the farm. So my mom did all the books, did all the admin, basically ran the business. But also my dad had other businesses as well. So he was also into the retail. So we had various shops and things like that.
Yeah, great.
And my mother was kind of looking after that side of the business to a large degree.
Very good. Yeah. And so what influence did that have on your life? Obviously, it introduced you to business very early. Were your father and your mother like really good role models for you?
They were, Daniel, very influential. And a lot of who I am and what I am today, I guess, is influenced by that. There's always this question of whether it's hereditary or whether it's from your... Yeah. I think it's a bit of both.
Absolutely.
So I inherited an entrepreneurial spirit from my father and give it a go. And for anyone who's ever farmed, you know that you're always on the edge. If it's not floods, it's famine. It's droughts. And if it's not droughts, it's pests. There's always some kind of challenges. So also learn to be resourceful and also to be resilient. So growing up in those kind of you're very dependent upon nature, and nature, as we all know, if you're a farmer, is 1 year drought, next year floods. So it's those almost extremities, and within that you have to learn to be fairly resilient and smart to work your way through it.
Absolutely. Was there anything that your parents said to you early on that you think was pivotal, or was there anything that they used to drum into you? Like, for an example, my parents growing up, the one thing that they repeated almost daily was there's no such word as can't, right? Like you can, whatever you put your mind to, you can do. And was there anything similar that you learned from your...
I think your parents and my parents listen to the same podcast.
Yeah, probably.
There's no such thing as it can't be done.
Yeah, that's right.
My dad always used to say, where there's a will, there's a way.
100%. Very good. So what does your life look like? You're a child growing up on a farm, and then eventually one day, you go through schooling, and then eventually one day you decide that you're going to join the military, or were you...
Yes, no, so we actually had no choice in that.
No choice.
So in South Africa at that point in time, it was compulsory for all males to do military service.
Yeah, wow.
So we all had to spend a minimum of 2 years in the military.
Is that still compulsory today?
No, not any longer, yes. Post the new government in 1992, that all ended.
All ended.
Yeah, so that all ended. But that was a fairly significant and formative phase in my life, if I can say that, because...
How old were you?
I actually finished school quite early, so I was 16 when I did my grade 12.
When
I matriculated.
Smarter than everyone else?
Well, I started school young. I started at the age of 5, which in South Africa most people started at the age of 6. So I was kind of a bit before.
Jumped in.
I was always the youngest in the class through the whole of school. And that's not always necessarily a good thing, because you're always the youngest, you're always the smallest, and you kind of get picked on as well. So there was an element of a bit of, I guess, looking back on it in life, a little bit of bullying.
Yeah.
But having grown up on a farm and growing up tough and being resilient, I guess that was one of the ways I navigated through that. So there's not always being an advantage being the youngest in your class.
No.
But being that as it may, I joined the military, and we first had to do our basic training, and during that course, or during the basic training, I was fortunate enough to be identified as somebody with leadership potential. They put us through batteries of tests, and obviously there was the physical tests that go with that. And I then...
So what did they see? Do you know what they saw in you to identify? I mean, obviously your ability to learn at a young age was critical, but what were some of those traits?
I guess what happened, Daniel, is that being in the military, we were all in squads and platoons.
Yeah.
And very soon, within first I was made what they called the bungalow bill.
Yeah.
So in our bungalow, I was put in charge of the bungalow.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I was made a squad leader. Yeah. So I think they saw that I took the lead, and and the whole intent of military is to be physically fairly arduous.
Yeah.
And I was always encouraging and motivating guys and going, guys, we can do this. Let's work together. Let's do this. Yeah. So I think they saw that, and then they put me through a battery of tests, as I said, and I was selected for officers course. And I guess for me that was fairly formative because that was my first introduction to leadership, and that created the foundation for the rest of my leadership career, I would say. Not that military leadership is necessarily the only way of doing it. It's fairly autocratic, and through life I've learned that there are many other leadership styles that can work very effectively. But that was very much the foundation of my leadership.
And what was that foundation? What do you look back on and go, that's probably stuck with me throughout my career?
Yeah, I guess I realized the importance of people and the importance of motivating. And what I noticed with a lot of the drill instructors and the sergeants and the corporals that we had, it was almost as if the intent was to break you down and to dehumanize you. And when I became an officer, I took a slightly different approach. And I'd seen that work when the corporals were shouting and screaming at us, and I would go, guys, we can do this, let's work together. And I found, at some subconscious level, I realized that was actually working better than the screaming and the shouting. And I tried that out as an officer, and I found that my unit performed best. In fact, I was selected as the only national service officer to train an elite unit. So even once I'd been an officer, the platoon that I was in charge of performed so well that they then, of all the, we call them national service lieutenants, I was lieutenant at that point, of all the national service lieutenants, I was the one that was selected to go and train a specialist unit. And I think what that taught me in life is that leadership is a lot about people, but it's about getting people engaged, about getting people motivated, and getting people to work together as a team. And that is far more powerful than the screaming and shouting and dehumanizing and autocratic type style of leadership.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. So, I mean, in this time in the military, I mean, how long were you?
Yeah, so we had 2 years of compulsory military service. And after 2 years, we went back to civilian life. That's typically when most of us went to university and studied. But once you were back in civilian life for a period of time, and it changed. At the time when I was, it was for 10 years. So for 10 years, you had to do what we called camps. So on an annual basis, you were called up and you had to do, depending on what the circumstances were, and at that time, South Africa was fighting both a conventional and a guerrilla warfare. We had to do anything between 1 and 3 months of service on an annual basis.
Okay. So 10 years you were there?
So 10 years in and out. So you had your civilian life, you lived your normal life.
And that's when you went and studied?
Yeah, so that's when I studied. And I guess what happened there is, again, the military was quite influential in what I chose to study. And I think in one of our discussions you said to me, what is unusual about you, and what is unconventional, and what something that people don't know. The unusual is that I actually started my career in human resources. I'm a CEO today, and not many people come from human resources to become a CEO.
No.
Now, the reason I chose to study human resources is the one thing that I learned in the military, and what I needed to learn more about was I had this desire to learn more about leadership and about people and what motivates people. So when I looked at the university degrees that were available, so I realized that I had a natural calling, if you call that, to be a leader, and I enjoyed being a leader. And I wanted to study in a field that would give me more insight into leadership practices, people behavior, etc. And the course that I identified at university that was able to do that for me was human resources. It included a bit of industrial psychology, it included a bit of understanding around human behavior, around motivation, around morale, around leadership. So I selected that as a degree course. And I was very fortunate that Anglo-American Corporation, which was at the time one of the largest mining companies in the world, was very kind enough to put me on a scholarship program. And I ended up going to university and studying in human resources.
Brilliant. And so, yeah, because we did speak about this last time, and it is unconventional because further to that, your next line of study was marketing, which was like, again, still going down a direction that doesn't normally point towards a CEO.
So it's actually quite interesting. So when I enrolled for my degree, I started studying and I realized that I had a lot of spare capacity. The other thing, so the degree is, although it was a human resources degree, it was actually a commerce-based degree. So I was studying economics, I was studying business economics, and I was studying accounting. So I had all of those as subjects as well. But in the course of studying the business economics subject, I realized that to be a true business leader, I needed to have a broader base of skills, experience, and knowledge. And what business economics did, it opened my eyes to all the various functions. Now, my dad, having been in his own businesses, wasn't a big corporate. I suddenly realized there were a whole lot of other functions out there that I realized I needed knowledge in. So what I did is I had spare capacity, so I approached the university and said I'd actually like to study an additional degree simultaneously. And they said, well, you can't do that.
No.
So I said, well, I'd like to do that. So they said, well, how are you going to fit it in? So I said, well, what I could do is do the human resources degree in the daytime, and I could go to night classes and do the marketing. So I identified marketing and sales management. So that course included a whole of consumer psychology, marketing, and sales management. So I said, well, I could do night classes on that. And they said, well, that's not possible. Long story short, they put me through a whole battery of tests as well. I had a fair number of battles. It was eventually escalated to the Vice Chancellor. And long story short, he finally gave permission for me to do that. So I was actually studying second year human resource degree, first year marketing and sales degree simultaneously. And then I completed both degrees simultaneously a year apart, and then with day and night classes. So that gave me a much broader scope.
You're superhuman.
So the other thing that I really do enjoy is the acquisition of knowledge.
I appreciate that, but that's a lot. And I think from someone at such a young age, what's your IQ? Are you diagnosed a genius?
I won't go there, but I do find studying and
you get energy from it.
I get image. I feed off of that. So you'll find if you track my career throughout my entire life, I have made sure that I continue to update my skills and stay relevant. And I think that's very important. So if you had a look through my CV, you'd see that after that, I did an MBA, and then after that, I've studied I've done courses at Harvard, I've done courses at Oxford University. So I've continued throughout my career to make sure that my current knowledge is relevant.
So I want to call out, I understand why you're doing that, right? But what motivates you to be relevant? Why? And look, it seems as if from such a young age you found this love with business and learning and studying, and then you obviously moved into that. So I think there's a few questions here. Is what motivates you to continually be relevant? But then on top of that, before you answer that question, let's go back. Why did you decide to move away from the military? Is it because you wanted to pursue a career in business?
Yes. So what I will say about the military, it has its limitations.
Yes.
I found it a very autocratic environment, a very almost dictatorial environment. And I believe that any leader I have a couple of philosophies in life, and one of those is that as a leader, you should try and learn something new every day of your life.
Yeah, great.
And the source of knowledge is not only books, and it's not only universities, and it's not only degrees. It's actually, and it's a policy that I apply in business, is to surround yourself with bright people, and to try and learn something from those people every day of your life. Now, the military doesn't promote that type of collaborative learning. Other people, if you surround yourself with really smart people, they have skills and knowledge. There's no single human being that can know everything about everything. So if you surround yourself with really smart people, you're a pretty dumb leader if you don't listen to what they have to say. So I've found that consultative, collaborative leadership style, where you surround yourself with smart people, ask them for their advice, ask them for their opinion, get their insight, and together you weave that together, and you come to a more sound and pragmatic solution often, and obviously you get insights that you may not have had before.
Yeah, no doubt.
So come back into your question, is that one of the things that we're all conscious or should be conscious of is that the world is changing and that the pace of change is accelerating.
Yes.
And we all need to constantly adapt to survive, and we need to learn, and we need to grow, and we need to surround ourselves not only with smart people, but we need to embrace knowledge, understanding, and experiences to be effective.
To be effective, and to make an impact on positive impact on this world. Yes. There's so much in what you just said there. I think for me, I want to ask a question from that of someone who is potentially running a small business, where surrounding yourself with great people, there might be like the lack of access to cash where you can get those people in. Yes. And what's your advice to those who are running small to mediums where that's not necessarily an opportunity?
I like your question.
Yeah.
So when you're in a small business, there's just the scale of your business, and as you said, the number of people you employ, obviously people also come at a cost.
Correct.
So you aren't able to do that. But what you can do and what you should do, and for example, I take myself as an example, even as part of a big business, I belong to as many associations as I can. Now, here in South Australia, we have the Industry Leaders Fund.
Yep.
And I would encourage any young business leader to join the Industry Leaders Fund,
because
what you do is you join a network, and it's not only peers. In that ILF, there are a number of senior business leaders. You have the opportunity through networking, and whether it be Business SA, and for instance, in Business SA, we have the 39ers, which again, that's Business SA identifying up-and-coming young business leaders and creating networks around them where they can actually gain access to people like myself and other people.
Which I'm part of.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's great to have you there.
This is great,
and it's those opportunities. So go out and make yourself part of those networks. Engage with people, have discussions, have meaningful discussions with people. You can go, and again, it's what you put in. I have another saying in life: life's an echo. Yeah. What you put in is what you get back out of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Now you can go to these events and stand around and drink a few wines and have a few social chats, or you can go there and seek out people who have wisdom, who have insight, who have experience, who have understanding, and test ideas with them. And you'll find that most people are happy to pay it forward.
Agreed.
I am. I'm happy to pay it forward.
That's how we met.
I've earned these grey hairs.
Yeah, I think that's how we met.
Absolutely. That's how we met.
We did. We met at an event, and I approached you and said, "You up for a chat?" And you said yes.
Absolutely. And I believe there's good in all people, and people are more than happy to share and to give and to support and to help. You just need to ask sometimes.
Absolutely. I see this quite often. I was at an event last night, actually, where there was sort of 300 plus people at this event, and you see some people who kind of congregate always to the same corner and with the same people, and it's just like, there's so much opportunity here. There's so many great people in this room. You should walk around, try to meet people, shake hands, meet someone new. I always like to go to those events and say, I want to meet someone new. I want to learn something about that person. Yeah. Like you said earlier, learn one thing every day. You might learn something new.
And I want to circle back, Daniel, and you asked me, why do I do all these strange things? And I'll tell you why I started doing them, apart from the fact that I did a lot of those in the military. So I was rappelling or abseiling, as we call it, and doing all kinds of strange things that took me outside of my comfort zone. And what I learned is that as a leader, you need to grow. As a human, you need to sometimes take yourself outside of your comfort zone. Now, a lot of the sports I do or the activities that I do take me outside my comfort zone. But I want to come back to your example of even a social setting. Yeah. If we just surround ourselves with the same people that we always know, and we always just chit-chat about social things, we've created a cocoon or a bubble around ourselves. And to learn and to grow, like a larva coming out of a pupa, sometimes you've got to break that cocoon. You've got to break that mold. You've got to break out of your comfort zone. You've got to go out and put yourself out there. You've got to go out and meet people who you've never met before. Engage like you and I did.
Agreed.
And start having conversations. And hopefully those conversations can and should add value.
Yeah, I mean, growth is in the uncomfortable, right?
Absolutely.
I have this analogy which has stuck with me for so many years. It's like if you imagine you're going to a Coles or a Woolworths shopping center. Remember, like the sliding doors
Yes.
that as they open, and it's like if you were someone from a different planet and didn't know that these doors, you're walking, and you're getting closer and closer, and these doors aren't opening, and it's like really, you're like, hang on, what's going on here? And you keep walking, and all of a sudden, swoosh, the doors open. Right, and then you have the ability to walk through. I think I really just apply that with my life. Is like, you've got to be uncomfortable for those doors to open.
Absolutely, I like that analogy.
Yeah. So in regards to so I want to actually talk. You mentioned Anglo-American Association where you were in the HR and IR role. Like in South Africa at the time, you saw some pretty horrific and traumatic stuff. Is that?
It was.
I think there was I recall a story about a potential strike.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. So, if you go back, South Africa has quite a tumultuous and conflict-ridden past. And during the time that I was in human resources, the country was going through some tremendous political pressures and change.
Yeah.
And working for Anglo-American Corporation, the voice of the people was the trade unions, and the trade unions became very, very powerful. And during the time I was in human resources at Anglo-American, we had a very significant strike in 1986, and it was fairly traumatic. So Anglo-American Corporation recruited people, and the other thing about South Africa is it's very multicultural. And for example, we have 11 official languages.
Yeah, wow.
So that just gives you an idea of the size and the diversity of the population.
Well, like different languages, like dialect?
Totally different languages.
Yeah, wow.
And majority of those would be what we would call black languages.
Yeah.
So they are from indigenous people in South Africa who speak different languages. But they also have different tribal affiliations, and the trade union strength was in the Xhosa and the Zulu tribal sort of base.
Yep.
And some of the people who weren't in that would actually try and go to work. And it was all pretty horrific. They would put tires around people, fill them with petrol, set them alight and burn them to death.
Yeah, wow.
We would go around in the morning sometimes and find people who broke ranks and tried to go to work decapitated. You'd find heads lying in there and bodies lying there. So,
what? And you saw?
Yeah. So it was pretty. I was in industrial relations at the time. So
and you saw all this.
We were in the cutting edge of that. I was not only seeing that, I was in the room negotiating with the trade union across the table that was perpetrating those type of atrocities. So it was very conflictual. It was very tough. It was very challenging.
But did the people who were going to work know that this was going to happen? Like that there was.
They were, but there's a level of desperation. So if you're poor and hungry and your family's starving, and you have to stay off work, and some of these strikes were lasting 6 weeks, 2 months.
Oh, wow.
You would be without food, your family would be desperate, and you'd break ranks and say, I'm going to work. And the only way that they kept the discipline was actually to kill people. So it was a fairly violent part of our history. And unfortunately, I was right in the heart of it.
How do you compartmentalize that? How do you remove those visions from your head? Like that seems to be something that's
I think they stay with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it also, so what I've tried to do from that is learn on how to not descend to that level. And the world we live in today has a lot of trauma. There's a lot of things happening around the world geopolitically.
Yeah.
And I guess what I would advocate for people is avoid it at all costs. Work collaboratively, work together, try and stay away, avoid getting into those depths of depravity.
Talk about a toxic culture. I mean, do you ever why did you stay in that role for how long? Or how long were you in?
So I was in that role for a short period of time.
Okay.
I was fortunately Anglo-American then also identified me as having what they called high potentials.
Yep.
Also through a series of tests and various things.
You've been tested a lot.
Yeah, I was. I've been doing that my whole life for some reason. But what they did is they put me on a management development program. So they realized that I had skills beyond just human resources.
Yep.
So they put me on a management development program, which is a 2-year program. And it was for what they called high pots, high potentials. And I wasn't the only one. There was a select group of us that were on that. It was a 2-year program, and I finished it in 9 months. So they went, okay, it was self-paced. So it was you had modules in various aspects of the business, and you needed to go
all with high distinctions on these courses.
There was a fair bit of that.
Yeah,
but it wasn't only the academic aspect of it. So you'd have to complete the modules, and then you'd have to do practical. So that was a fantastic experience. That was really good because it exposed me to different aspects of the business. So you do the theoretical module on that business and the theories and management practices and policies and procedures and processes for every aspect of the business. And then you actually were deployed in that part of the business, and you'd actually have to work in that. So I've worked in everything from public relations to human resources to you name it. I've worked in every function of business except for I haven't worked in IT and I haven't worked in finance.
Okay.
Now, I've studied finance and I've done an MBA. I mean, I understand.
You know finance. You can read it.
I've actually not worked as an accountant that way, and I haven't worked in IT. Only two areas of business that I haven't worked in.
Well, look out, world. That's where. Wait till you get. Well, I mean, IT is the new language, right?
It is the new language, but again, the fact that I don't work there doesn't mean that I don't understand.
No, true.
Like cybersecurity and in fact,
well, you need to.
So absolutely, and that's if we do a quick segue into that is one of the massive opportunities for the future is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And working back from that is the whole digitization, automation, and robotics. So I also had the fortune of being the CEO of an automation and robotics company along the way, and just understood the power of the future and improve productivity and efficiencies and gains that would allow us to substantially accelerate the economy, even in places like Australia, if we were to embrace that more readily.
Well, I was going to ask questions about that later, but let's jump into it now while we're talking about it. So you've quite you've come out and said that there is this talk of let's build South Australian population and get to 2 million people and grow population and jobs, and you've kind of got like a different stance on that, which I actually really love.
I do have. I have a different take on it, and the challenge that we have, and this is not just an Australian problem, it's most developed countries in the world, and even less developed countries like China are facing this problem now, is that the population has peaked and that you actually have demographically the populations are reducing and people are getting older and there's fewer young people coming into business. So we in Australia are challenged to find enough highly qualified, highly skilled people to do the jobs that we have to do. And one of those solutions, and Australia does it very well, in fact, Australia does it probably one of the best in the world. There's a few other countries that do it well, is immigration. And immigration's all good and well, but immigration, if you use it as a blunt instrument, in itself is not going to solve our problems, because what it does do, and we all know that we have a housing crisis, for example, in this country, and the cost of housing is becoming unaffordable, and that's driven by supply and demand. The demand for housing exceeds the ability and the capacity to build it fast enough. And that's leading to these exorbitant housing prices. And we're just talking housing. When you increase the population substantially, you need more hospitals, you need more schools, you need more police stations, you need more railways, you need more roads. And
you're not necessarily recruiting the right talent too.
Exactly, absolutely. So population growth is important because it's one of the economic stimulators, but it needs to be done in a very smart. We need to do it in a laser approach and not in a shotgun approach. We need to really be focused on attracting high caliber, highly qualified, highly intellectual people into our economy. And the reason for that is that we are not a low-cost labor country, and we never will be. Our competitive advantage needs to be through intellectual capacity, and that means bringing smart people. And you can buy, and as I mentioned, I've been in the automation and robotics, you can buy a lot of solutions off the shelf. We actually need to get to the point where we're not just buying other people's solutions, where we are actually developing solutions ourselves.
Yeah.
And that goes all the way back into academics and research and development. It's attracting highly qualified, highly intelligent, highly capable people. That will allow us to then rapidly grow our economy. We need to be writing the software. We need to be innovating. We need to be finding the solutions. And we need to be doing it in a way that doesn't require large numbers of people. And if I can do a quick segue into business and the Mitsubishi business and what we've done in Australia, is we have significantly improved the business over the last couple of years that I've been there. And I guess one of the questions I often get from government is, and other industry associations, is how many new jobs have you created?
Yeah.
And
That's their remit as a Labor government.
absolutely, but that's also very much an industrial age way of thinking.
Correct.
What you should be asking me is how much more tax am I paying? Because that's what's happened. We've grown the business significantly, and we've made it significantly more profitable with the same number of people, and that's through adopting automation and digitization. So instead of having multiple spreadsheets, we've got software people in, and we've written programs that allow us to extract and collate and package and put the information together. So suddenly we've taken, and I can give many examples, where we would have to be putting together reports for our parent company that would have taken probably 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, wow.
After we've written the software, we can do it in 3 hours.
Yeah.
Now, we've given that individual all that time back in their life to do more value-adding things. So what you do is automate and digitize all the mundane, repetitive, regular things.
Yeah.
You improve the accuracy of the information, and instead of having to manipulate 20 or 30 spreadsheets, you have all the data presented to you in a dashboard, and bang, you've got the information. You can make decisions much quicker, much faster, and more accurately. So you can accelerate the pace at which you do business. You can improve the way you do things. So I think we should be we're living in the digital age, and we should be embracing digitization and automation, and it will allow us to improve the productivity, the throughput, and the efficiency of our businesses significantly.
Yeah.
And I'm talking a lot about digitization, but as I said, even in my role as the CEO of a robotics and automation company, we demonstrated to companies how you can improve your efficiency, and compete. You can actually, through the correct application of automation of factories, we can actually compete with low labor cost countries.
Yeah.
Because our equipment works 24/7, never needs a holiday, doesn't need a pay rise, it doesn't go on strike, it doesn't give us any of the hassles that we sometimes have with deep, dark, and dirty jobs.
So we've recently interviewed Adrian Temple, who is chair of the South Australian Productivity Commission. He's also the CEO of Thompson Gear, which is a big legal firm. But he said to us on the show that South Australia is actually probably one of the least educated states in regards to if you're actually talking from degree level. So that poses a challenge, is if we have and we automate the low-level jobs, which is where the majority of our workforce is placed, how do we upskill all those people in being able to take on that higher?
So, Daniel, you've taken me to another area that I have a passion for.
Yeah, great.
And that is, and I'll use a lesson that I learned when I was with Anglo American Corporation in South Africa. At the time, there was a shortage of advanced skills in the mining industry. So we couldn't find metallurgists and things like that. And South Africa was recruiting a lot of them as immigrants, particularly from the UK at that point in time. So we had a lot of British metallurgists working in our organization. And I was in human resources at Anglo American at the time, and I said, guys, this is not the solution. We need to build our own talent.
Correct.
And what cut a long story short, what Anglo American did is they approached eventually 3 of the top universities in South Africa, and they established faculties, and the company paid for it. Anglo American put the money in, and they actually paid for the deans, and they paid for a number of professors, and they recruited high quality caliber professors from around the world, brought them into these universities in South Africa as expatriates, and they paid them good sums of money. Some eventually became South African citizens. They remained there, and they continued to contribute to the economy. But what we did is we grew our own. We built our own talent. We built our own skills. Now, that's an area I'm passionate about. And I've had many of those discussions, even with our Premier, Peter Malinauskas, is, for example, TAFEs. And the other thing I also want to say is we shouldn't just focus on universities.
No.
We should never underestimate the need, and we should glamorize more and more the need for TAFEs, because our economy is built on technical skills. If I look at one of the most successful economies in the world, which is Germany, as a manufacturing economy, the power of what they've done is to actually, at probably about grade 9 in school, you actually can select a vocational career, or you can select an academic career. And a lot of people actually select, and they become fitters, turners, electricians, they become tradespeople. And even if you look at our current housing shortage, what we need right now to reduce the cost of housing, more plumbers, carpenters, bricklayers, electricians, you name it. We need to grow, and we need to provide people with low-cost, affordable education opportunities. And TAFEs is part of the solution, because we do need to upskill our labour force. Now, one of the challenges when I was the CEO of this automation company, I had a very heated discussion with somebody one day, and they said, you're destroying jobs. I said, we can't even find, and I had discussions with the CEO of a large company in the agricultural space, and he was going, we can't find people to pick our grapes. We can't find people to pick our apples. And I said, we have to look at automation.
Yeah.
There are countries around the world, other high-cost labor countries, Europe being one of them, where they've learned how to plant vineyards and trees and things in a certain way that you can actually automate it. So instead of people doing back-breaking work, picking apples or picking grapes, we have machines that do it.
Absolutely.
So it solves our labor problem. It solves our skill shortage. And it allows us to give people higher paid jobs. We upskill people and we pay them more money and they have a better standard of living. They're trapped in those low, what I call dark and dirty labor jobs that nobody wants to do.
Yeah, 100%. We do a lot of work in the aged care industry and health industry as well. And my understanding, and don't quote me on these numbers, but there's like 10,000 nurses potentially, availability of nurses, like where there's just no frontline in that whole industry in Australia. And it's like there isn't enough people to do that. So the aged care industry have to look at automating because...
Absolutely. And again...
And the population's only going to get older, right?
And not only in Australia, in other countries around the world. And that, again, just screams opportunity because there are countries in the world, and we can quote them and we can visit them, where a lot of those frontline services are automated. You have robots in rooms monitoring patients, reacting, calling for help when the patient stops breathing. I mean, this technology is already available. Now, if we were to embrace automation and digitization and technology, and we were to embrace R&D, we would be looking at how do we automate more of these tasks, and how do we sell that technology across the rest of the world. And that's how Australia becomes a leader in the world, not a follower.
Stop buying it, start figuring it out.
Start building it, and then sell it to the rest of the world. Because the rest of the world also has an aging population problem. So if we innovate in that space, and we do develop automation, digitization, robotics that can do a lot of those functions, there's a massive opportunity. And that's what I'm advocating. That's what I'm saying we should embrace as a country. But to do that, we have to go back into the education, the academic chain, into the TAFEs, into creating people who think and act and approach life differently to what we've done.
But how do we? I mean, the government is Labor government right now, which is like unions and people jobs is their remit. You're not going to shift that, are you?
I'm going to give our Premier full marks.
Yeah.
Because in discussions that I've had with him, and if you've seen one of the first things that our Premier Peter Malinauskas did when he took over as Premier was to look at opening more TAFEs.
Yeah.
So I actually think we're on the right track.
We're on the right track.
I think he's, despite whether he's Labor or Liberal, he's doing the right things.
Yeah. But still jobs is their kind of...
Absolutely. But those do create jobs. But I guess the challenge that we have, Daniel, is we need to start thinking differently. I can't find people to fill the vacancies I've got. Why would I create more vacancies?
Yeah.
So creating jobs is not our problem as a country any longer. Not at the moment anyway.
Yeah.
Our challenge right now is finding talent, is finding skills, is finding people.
Unemployment's to
fill the vacancies we've got. So why would we create a whole bunch more vacancies when we can't even fill the ones we've got?
Makes sense. But then we need the technology and the cash to be able to do that, right?
Absolutely.
So it feels like we're stuck in a way.
Yeah, but again, it all goes, and this is where government has a role to play because it all goes back into those educational institutions.
Yeah.
Building those institutions, building the talent. And there's the simple analogy I have is if you have two people, one's been through a TAFE, and I'll use a very simple example, and he's been qualified as an electrician. And I don't have any degree, and I have no qualifications, and I have no education, and I have no skills. I'm not marketable. So if anyone's going to become unemployed, I'm going to become unemployed. But even if that electrician were unemployed, he could walk around and knock on your front door and say, "Excuse me, sir, I'm a qualified electrician. Is there anything I can do for you? Can I put some lights in your garden? Is there something I can do?" They have skills that are marketable that they could use to then establish themselves and create a business.
Yeah.
Whereas the poor guy who has nothing can end up sleeping under a bridge somewhere.
Yeah.
So it all comes back to educating our population and creating opportunity through education.
With your, I mean, you've obviously put a lot of thought into this. What's the time frames for this to start turning around? It's obviously not a 1 to 2 year thing. Yeah. It's a long term.
That's right. It's a long term. And I think as a country to position ourselves differently, and as a state to position ourselves differently, we do have to take a long term. Anything that's worth having is we have to, and that's what good leaders do, is they go, what does the future look like? And they work back from there and say, okay, so where do I need to position myself? What do I need to do to achieve that outcome, that end game, that end goal? And it does require investment. It does require a different way of thinking. not short-termism, not 2 years, not 4 years, not 3 years.
Yeah.
We need to be thinking 10, 15, 20 years out. And we need to be thinking future generations. And we need to be thinking of our kids and going, can they afford a house? Will they be able to afford a house? Okay, we've got a problem. What do we need to do to fix that problem? And most meaningful change is very considered, and it's long-term, and it's an approach. It's a way of thinking.
I love it. I love it. Right. So let's just go back up that rabbit hole for a moment.
Absolutely.
Let's get back into. So you've left Anglo American, and then you've gone into Coca-Cola.
Yeah, but before that, so what happened is that Anglo American owned a lot of subsidiary companies.
Okay.
And they've since divested of those and focused on their core business, and they become a much smaller company.
Yep.
But they owned companies in many different industries. One of those, one of the things that we had in those days, in these days, underground mining is done with hydraulic props.
Yep.
I'm going back 30 years now. It was wood props.
Yep.
So we used to, and I was working for Anglo American, which had the deepest mines in the world. I was working on Western Deep Levels, which is still, I believe, the deepest mine in the world, over 3 kilometers underground.
Yeah, wow.
So the rock pressures are extreme. The hot rock temperatures are also extreme. People go to work with ice jackets on, but be that as it may, one of the things that we used to do is support the overhang, which is the roof. So you're mining out, you're hollowing out the ground underneath. You need to put packs in underneath to support that ground, otherwise it all collapses, and we used to have lots of that, and a lot of people used to die. So they owned forestry companies, and they used to, for the simple reason that was one of the key requirements to build these props was wood, and they build these props underground that would hold up. So I ran out of a bit of space in terms of promotion opportunities. I was hungry and I was moving fast. So one of the opportunities arose for me to join one of their subsidiary companies called Huntley, Shires and Hepburn, which was a forestry and sawmilling company.
Yep.
So I joined that company and spent a few years there first before that was bought out by Sappi, which was the world's, I think still is the world's largest paper and pulp company, and they wanted to transfer me back to Johannesburg. Now, my wife and I had a traumatic experience in Johannesburg. We were in a shopping centre, and guys came in with AK-47s and opened fire on us, and I was lying on top of my wife under a bench in the shopping centre to protect her from the bullets. And we left Johannesburg and...
Which is a random robbery? Is that what?
Random robbery. It happens all the time in South Africa. That's just...
And started shooting towards you?
Yeah, so what they do is they just open fire and everyone screams and shouts and falls flat on the floor, and then they go into the shopping centres and they clean out the tills or clean out the safe and then escape.
Oh my goodness!
So that happens all the time in South Africa. It's the reason I left South Africa.
Yeah,
the crime and the violence in South Africa is just on a different scale.
Did you have kids at that time?
I didn't. At that time, I didn't. So I was working for Anglo American Corporation, and I was in Johannesburg. We left Johannesburg, and I moved down to the Eastern Cape with this forestry and sawmilling company.
Yeah. So it's Johannesburg. Just out of curiosity, is that?
It's the Sydney of South Africa.
It's
the.
That's where the majority of crime is, though.
Yeah, it's also where the majority of crime is, and it's also the industrial capital of South Africa.
Yeah.
So when Sappi bought out this company, they wanted to transfer me back to the head office in Johannesburg, and I said,
"No, thanks.
That's not happening." So it was at that point that I got a job with Coca-Cola.
Okay.
Yeah. So I moved into a role with Coca-Cola as Group Industrial Relations Manager initially.
Yeah.
And at that time, looking after. So that was also a very interesting time and probably fairly formative in my life experience. So South Africa, because of its apartheid policies, had been a pariah state, and there were many boycotts, and many countries had exited South Africa, including Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola had privatized their assets in South Africa, and they were run as franchises.
Okay.
When Nelson Mandela came to power with the new government, that all changed, and Coca-Cola came back to South Africa, and they bought back their businesses. Now, a lot of companies like General Motors that also exited, they also came back. So many multinationals who left South Africa came back, and they reinvested in South Africa. But at the same time, the Soviet Union collapsed in around 1989. The wall came down. A lot of countries in Africa, there was a polarization in Africa. You either were with the West or you were with the Soviet Union.
Yep.
And the Soviet Union had pumped a lot of money into a lot of African countries, bought them in a way, but also supported them economically and financially, and also with guns and, unfortunately, many other things. In Africa is still awash with guns. But because the Soviet Union collapsed, that economic support of many of those African countries, and many of them they had what they called socialist governments, which were largely communist type of governments, and those were countries like Tanzania, Mozambique, and you keep going through the list. Those governments collapsed, and a form of democracy emerged in Africa. But what had happened is that under communism, or under socialism as they call it, many of those countries had nationalized their assets, including the Coca-Cola factories. when that economic support ended, a lot of those companies were cash-strapped, and they also didn't know what to do and how to do it. So Coca-Cola came back into South Africa, bought back into the South African business. I fortunately got recruited at that point in time because the company was on a massive expansion, on a growth expansion. South Africa, we had very good skills. So Coca-Cola used South Africa as the base to then go across a number of countries in Southeast and Central Africa. And I was involved in those projects where we did a lot of, some of it was brownfields. We'd actually go in and we were rebuilding factories that were antiquated, outdated, putting in a lot of capital investment, new equipment, new machinery, new production lines.
So you sort of operationalized it all? Is that
that's right, yes. So I was part of the team that would go in and then would obviously do the analysis of the business, what state it was in. Some we'd just put in a bulldozer and flatten it and rebuild it. Some were greenfield sites, so we identified opportunities in countries where there weren't factories, and we built factories that hadn't been there. A lot of them were brownfield sites where we just went in and invested a lot and rebuilt it. So we had to rebuild those, and I was part of that, and that taught me a lot in life about business and business opportunities. So we would go in and literally sit down, and I was part of a team of 5 guys or 6 guys, and we had McKinsey working with us, and we would identify all the shortcomings, all the weaknesses, all the areas of opportunity, all the areas of growth, areas requiring investment, and that was everything from people to equipment to machines to trucks to distribution to manufacturing lines. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot about building a business from the ground up, about looking at the financial and looking at the feasibilities, looking at the market, looking at the size of the market. So those are skills that I was very fortunate to be promoted. I was in very senior management positions at a very young age. So I joined Coca-Cola when I think I was 29 at the time, and already in an executive position, and then got promoted fairly rapidly off the back. So in my early 30s, I was sitting right at the top of the tree doing a lot of stuff that most people don't get the chance to do in their life.
In Coca-Cola South Africa, not
globally? So initially it was Coca-Cola South Africa. I became I was one of the country managers for South Africa. Yeah. But then Coca-Cola, so it was called Coca-Cola SABCO, Coca-Cola South African Bottling Company.
Okay.
But then what we did is that company got dissolved, and we created a new company called Coca-Cola Africa, of which Coca-Cola is the majority shareholder. Yeah. And the head office is still based in South Africa.
Okay.
And I was based in that head office in South Africa. So I got to travel a lot. I looked after many countries. I got lots of exposure, many different languages, many different cultures, doing business in different environments. I got to understand the business from the grassroots up, investments, return on investments. It was a fantastic, in my early 30s, fantastic growth experience that has stood me in good stead for the rest of my life.
No doubt, which is obviously where you, you went from the CEO, from the role at Coca-Cola to COO role at AC
Whitcher.
AC Whitcher, and then eventually became the CEO there. And from my understanding, completely turned that company around on the back of what you probably learnt at Coca-Cola.
Yes. So it was a very interesting journey that I was on. So what happened with Coca-Cola is eventually I was traveling so much across multiple countries, and our Africa head office was initially in London, and the global head office was in Atlanta. So I was doing a lot of traveling, and I was seldom at home. And with a lot of these projects in Africa, you'd leave on a Monday morning and get back on a Friday night, and sometimes you leave on a Monday morning and get back on a Friday 2 weeks later.
Yeah, wow.
So it got to the point where
And you had kids at this?
I had kids, yeah. So I had kids who at the time were 8 and 10.
2 girls?
2 girls.
2 girls.
Yes. And at one point, my wife and I sat down and I said, my daughter's 8, the younger one, and the older one is 10. She doesn't know father went to work at 8 and came home at 5. Another 8 years, and that one, my elder daughter, will be out of home, out of school, out of home, and gone. And she'll have never known a father who was present. So I decided I need a lifetime change, a change of life. And I was on the board of a private school, and the chairman of that board liked my way of thinking, and I've been on the board for a number of years, so he knew my way of thinking, my strategic thinking, my approach, and he'd asked me a number of times to join his company. And I was loving what I was doing at Coca-Cola, so I didn't take up the opportunity. But things kind of came together, and his brother, who was a partner in the company, was retiring. And he said, this is your chance. You have to come now, otherwise I'm going to take somebody else on board. And it was also at that point where I'd been with Coca-Cola for about 10 years, traveling extensively and excessively in that time, that the two things came together. And I sat down with him, I had an honest conversation. Now, his company was a private family-owned, medium-sized company in the industry that he was in. And Diana's name was Raymond. I said, Raymond,
Yeah.
you need to understand that I am not a good, what's the right word, keeper of the current order.
Yeah. I'm a disruptor.
I'm a disruptor.
Yeah.
And I'm all about change, and I'm about growth and transformation. And he said, that's exactly what my business needs. So, cut a long story short, he basically gave me an open checkbook and said, do what you have to do. So one of the first things I did is I joined this company. It was a sawmilling and forestry company.
Yeah.
And he knew
Which you had experience in.
Which I had experience. So he knew I had that experience. And he'd been, and in that company that I had been, I'd made quite a big change. And he knew that because we were in competition with each other.
Yeah.
So he wanted me.
Yeah.
And the first thing I did, one of the first things we did was we were in the sawmilling industry and we make planks. Now, planks are commodity. A plank is a plank is a plank.
Yeah.
And we were supplying into the housing industry, and the size and the dimensions, everything's regulated.
Mm-hmm.
So the only differentiator is price.
Yeah.
And the first thing I did was say, how can we differentiate ourselves as a commodity? How can I make us a lot more valuable than the competitor down the road? And the very first thing that I did was I started looking globally, and there were massive markets for us, opportunities in Europe. But the Europeans were very environmentally focused and joining the dots. And one of the opportunities that we had is we were growing Australian carry gum. I had no idea if it was in Australia.
Yeah, go figure.
We were growing Australian carry gum in South Africa. In Australia, it's very protected and prescribed. In South Africa, it was an alien species, and we could farm it and harvest it as much as we liked. And our business was all about sustainability.
Yeah.
You take one tree out, you replace it with another one. Otherwise, you don't have a business in 10 years' time.
Correct.
So it was all about sustainability. So we were farming these trees in South Africa, because that's what forestry is. We're farming trees, essentially. The Europeans, and particularly the Dutch, line their canals with timber. And because they're so environmentally conscious, they don't want any timber that's treated with because you put timber in water, it rots.
Yeah.
And the way to stop that is to treat it with chemicals. The Dutch didn't want that because they said the chemicals would leach into the water and obviously pollute the water and sea life and everything else.
Yep.
So this carry gum, which is used to make railway sleepers, is very extremely hard wood, and if you submerge it in the water, it'll be there for a few hundred years.
Yeah, wow.
So there was a massive opportunity for us. So what I did as an organization, and to get entry, the key into the European market, and particularly the Dutch, it was eventually Belgium and other markets as well that we went into, but Holland was our first port of call, was I then certified our company through FSC as being a sustainable forestry business. As I said, every tree you take out, you replace it with another tree. And all our practices were sustainable. So we were very environmentally focused. So I got FSC accreditation. Now, straight away, our product was no longer, we were differentiated. We were no longer a commodity. We were different to our competitors. And we were able to access European markets that other companies weren't. So that was the first thing we did, was get into international markets, and we started exporting. That went very well. The company took off. We grew. We actually doubled the size of the business. We bought new factories. We put in new production lines. We doubled the size of the company. 3 years in. So that was 2005.
Yeah.
3 years in.
2008.
Phone call from our boss. The world's falling apart. What are we going to do? GFC had happened. The bubble had burst.
Yeah. And the boss being the owner.
Being the owner.
Yeah.
And he and I sat down, and so he was in a state of panic. Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? Because what had happened is that many of the European banks were bailing out their governments, and the governments were bailing out companies to keep them alive in Europe during the GFC. And a lot of these projects were government funded, and that funding dried up. And we sat down and said, well, what are we going to do? And what essentially happened is a lot of our competitors actually went bankrupt, went out of business. I sat down and I'm going to oversimplify it. I spun the globe. Yeah. I put a globe in front of me, spun it around, literally, and said, where in the world is there growth opportunity? And at that point in time, China was still was growing about between 9 and 11% over a period of time, 9 to 10 to 11%. And I said, we have to get a product that we can sell into China. So that meant getting on planes, flying to China, attending some trade fairs, trying to make some contacts. And interestingly enough, we found opportunities in a couple of countries in Southeast Asia. So one of the first opportunities for us, so when you cut a tree is round, and you lose the outside is round, and there's the planks you cut out are square. So you have a lot of waste. Roughly anything, if you're really good, slightly less than 50%. If you're not so good,
Yeah,
50% of your product goes into waste.
Yeah, wow.
So we started chipping this waste because that's in sawmilling, that's a major problem, is your sawdust and your waste.
Yeah.
Now, traditionally, we're trying to sell that into farmers to make fertilizers and composts and things like that. But you make no money out of that. So it's just a way of getting rid of your problem, basically, which is your waste. The first thing we did was starting to chip that product and sell it to Japan as chips. So we got an opportunity to sell product into Japan, but still relatively low value.
Yeah.
We then identified that China, part of what China was doing was making furniture and exporting it around the world. And they had the final furniture factories. But what we did was we then became their suppliers into their supply chain. So we used the same factory, we used the same saws, but what we did is obviously change the dimensions and change the final product that we're selling. And we actually pivoted into Southeast Asia. So we found markets in Vietnam. We're selling hardwood products into Vietnam. We started selling handles, hoe handles, rake handles, pick handles. We started adding value. So we bought in additional equipment. We were making hammer handles, axe handles, pick handles, all kinds of handles. So we were value adding, and we're selling those into the United States and into Australia, interesting enough, to Bunnings.
Yeah, there you go.
So a lot of the stuff that was in Bunnings was actually coming out of our company. So we pivoted and we found new markets. So we survived and we grew. And as our competitors started closing down, we started buying them and acquiring them. And we ended up, and then the good news is post-20, so I was in that business until 2015, 2016 when I immigrated. Europe started coming back. So post-GFC,
You got all your...
Europe started coming back, and these guys wanted their product that we used to sell them. So we installed more capacity, we built more factories, and we pivoted. And we had actually quadrupled the size of the business in 10 years.
That's amazing.
And we had double the volume in 2 different markets, different products, and we significantly grew that business.
I think, I want to just touch on the disruptor thing, right? It's obviously a big risk, which the founder would have had to have had full trust in you to make that risk and pivot in that way. What is your thought process in that? I mean, to pick up a globe and go, right, where can we go global? There's talk of a potential recession coming in the market next year. Is that something that you buy into?
I do.
Yeah.
But again, we already have plans and strategies, which I can't talk about yet.
As in Mitsubishi, but what's your advice to those who are trying to plan for that now?
So I have many sayings that I live by in life, and one of those is never waste a good crisis. And off the back of that is always find the opportunity in the adversity. So let's look for that. So let me give you another example and I'll stick with some of the previous companies I worked with because that's neutral. One of the other challenges that we had in South Africa is that we had a new government, and the new government had a very social program. So they were building houses and doing all kinds of social programs, which was good because people didn't have good quality housing. But it drained all their cash. And the population in South Africa grew rather rapidly. It's sitting at about 65. At the time, it was about 45, and it grew very rapidly to 65. And it's probably officially 65, and probably unofficially about 70 million now, because we have... So South Africa is the economic powerhouse of Africa, and you have lots of immigrants, and I'll call them illegal immigrants because they come across the border undocumented into South Africa because that's where you can get work. So South Africa's population grew very rapidly, but what the government didn't do was do that long-term planning and thinking that I spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
So they didn't build any new power stations, and at some point the country started running out of power, and we were experiencing blackouts. Now, as the CEO of a company, if you're a private individual and you have blackouts, it's inconvenient.
Yeah.
And you can buy a generator, or you can use battery-powered lamps and lights, and you can use gas to cook with. It's inconvenient. If you're running a big company, a manufacturing company with big factories, and you have lights out for 8 hours a day,
you need power.
that is a serious cost to your business.
Correct.
So we were in the fortunate position as a sawmilling company in that we were generating a lot of sawdust and waste, which we were selling as low-cost, low-value product to Japan and other places. In that, I saw the opportunity. So we were sitting with a company, and we sat down, and these things aren't, in retrospect, and when you sit on a podcast and talk about them, it sounds like it was a light bulb moment. No, it's not. It's many hours of intense, deep study, analysis, discussion, debate, engagement. So, and some of it requires, you need a well thought out, carefully thought out plan, and you need to go to financiers, and you need backing. And if you've run your company carefully and you have a bit of a war chest, that's even better. But what we did is I put together, joined a few dots, and Power outages, massive blackouts, hours and hours a day, losing lots of money. We were sitting on a pile of sawdust, and I went, can we, and what we were also doing, as every sawmill does, is we have boilers, because what you need is you burn some of that sawdust to create steam, and the steam, you pump it into a kiln and you dry your timber. So again, it's just joining dots. And I went, well, if we're burning, we already had boilers, we're already burning this, we're making steam, can we upscale this and generate power and run our business on our waste? And that's at the heart of where we ended up. So what we did is in South Africa...
So you became self-sufficient.
Yeah, so going back 30, 40 years before that, each town had its own power station, used to generate its own power. These things had all been mothballed, were standing idle, and we approached two towns, Oudtshoorn and Grahamstown, two towns in South Africa, and we said, can we buy your power station? And these were cash-strapped municipalities. Went, wow, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, take it.
Got them. Paid a few million, got them. We dismantled them, we took them, and we erected them on our sawmilling sites. We then took our waste. So we had to modify the boilers, because the calorific value of sawdust is much lower than coal, and these were coal-powered fire stations. So we had to put extra tubes into our boilers. We had to make some modifications. But we then, long story short, were burning sawdust in these boilers, generating steam, driving turbines, and generating power. But because we'd bought power stations that had run a whole city, we had excess capacity. And the government doesn't have power. So guess what? I engaged, and it was a long process. Again, it took probably close to 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, negotiating with government to sell power back and getting agreements through what was called NERSA, the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, negotiating with NERSA to get agreements so you could sell power back onto the grid. And so what you've turned misfortune into opportunity, adversity into opportunity. And that's
created a money printing machine.
Oh, absolutely.
Really,
absolutely. And the government was desperate for power. So
wow.
Not only did we solve our problem, we solved our waste problem, we had enough power for ourselves, and we generated a new revenue stream selling that power onto the grid. So when life gives you lemons, make lemonade.
Yes, I agree, and I love the saying. But your way of thinking and your tenacity and your resilience, and I mean, we talked about context earlier. The ability for you in all your career to think like this is one that I don't know. I just think it's you're one of a kind in a sense that because it's quite difficult, because people get caught up with emotion. They get caught up with, oh my God, my business is going broke. Oh no, what am I doing? I have to let people go. Because you stick with your core, strategy, right?
And all those emotions are real, and we shouldn't discount them.
Yeah.
But we do need to work through them, and keeping yourself anchored to rationality is one thing. I think the other advantage that I have, and a lot of people, and we're all different as humans. I like stimulation, I like adventure, I like new things. And I've worked in multiple industries. Now, some people choose a particular career in a particular industry, and they spend their lives there, and they get profound, deep knowledge, some people in a particular industry. For me, it was different. For me, I enjoyed the stimulation of transferring knowledge, working between industries. But what I did gain off the back of that was exposure to multiple facets and different ways of thinking, different industries. And I guess that the opportunity for any great leader is to learn from your experiences. Join the dots, piece things together, put things together, create. So there's two ways of looking at life. You can learn from others, and that's important to learn from others and apply that. But to be truly profound, you need to think outside the square. You need to come up with something new, something that's different, something that differentiates you, something that sets you apart. And what is that? And the reality is that the world presents us with all those opportunities all the time, because everything as we know it is a state of flux. Everything is in a state of change. The world, I often laugh at people who speak about the good old days. Yeah. But actually the good days lie ahead. It's how we formulate the future. It's how we look at trends, patterns, the changing world around us, and join the dots, weave it together. Take the time for introspection, reflection, think 10, 15 years out. What's the world going to look like? What's my industry going to look like? What's going to be different? What's happening over here that's going to change what's happening over here? what's happening with social media, what's happening with artificial intelligence, how is that going to change the future? What aspect of my business can I use to pivot, to lean into that, to create an opportunity for myself? So it's a way of thinking.
I love it. And SynergyIQ, the business that I run and lead, we help organizations through complex change and transformation. And I guess everything I'm hearing right now is, from where you pivoted to the continual change, the continual growth, the continual learning, the continual investment in people, is something that is obviously really critical to your role as a CE. How do you go about managing change? I mean, for us, it's very important that people are always considered, and often what we see is company makes decision because it improves bottom line or there's a potential return on investment, but they've almost pushed upon this change onto the organisation, of which people are told to do the change.
Yes.
Without it actually being embraced. What's your thoughts on real quality business transformation?
So as somebody that operates in the space, you will know how complex change can be. And for me, it always starts with that formulation of the vision. Mm-hmm. So it's understanding what the future looks like. And again...
And how far?
Absolutely. So it depends what business you're in.
Yeah.
Because the time frame and the horizon differs very much depending on the industry you're in. So in the forestry industry, the trees you plant now, maybe the next generation will harvest them.
Yeah,
so you're thinking 40, 50 years out.
Yeah.
In the motor industry, we're thinking 10 to 15 year cycles. So it depends on the industry that you're in. Mm-hmm. And so that time frame, that horizon will be different. But I think the key for a leader is to identify trends and patterns, as I said earlier, and then sit, and if you've surrounded yourself with good people, is to sit with people and debate, discuss those, because there are so many variables, there's so many unknowns, and every business has its own strengths and it has its own weaknesses. So it's really the key for me is in the formulation of the vision. And once and again, I mean, I would never profess to know everything about everything, so bouncing ideas off of other people, validating your thoughts, validating your opinions, getting the insights, getting the inputs, it helps create a clearer vision, but it also creates buy-in and ownership. And no change will be successful unless people understand the need for change. Why are we changing? I've worked in many businesses where the standard answer is we've always done it this way.
Correct.
Why do we need to do different?
Chimpanzee paradox.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. So getting people to understand the need for change allows people to embrace change easier, because for many people change is something to be feared because it's the unknown. So making it more visible, making it more known, understanding, yes, there's risks, yes, there's unknowns, let's talk about them. And if they do happen, scenario planning. If that happens, what are we going to do? So it creates, I won't say a safety net, because there's no such thing as perfect safety, but it does create a sense of, actually, you take away a lot of the uncertainties, a lot of the unknowns. You create a sense of, yes, we're going into this with our eyes open. Yes, there are risks. This could happen, that could happen. But if that happens, we're going to do this. So scenario plan, work with people. People buy in, and that is critical, because within any business, and even within consumers, there's early adopters, and then there's late adopters. In between, there's a range of other people. It's important to identify the early adopters in your business and to use them, develop them, grow them, give them skills, train them as change agents.
Yes.
People who can see the vision, who understand the vision. Don't have only the CEO having the vision. Create a buy-in. Get other people to buy into the vision, to start sharing the vision, to start talking about the vision, to help you to grow. So for me, that's just a few, without going into a lot of details.
Oh, without doubt.
The seeds of successive change.
Well, I think for us, it's, I think you've nailed you've hit the nail on the head, in the sense of, first and foremost, we have to understand, do we have the maturity as an organisation to be able to embark on this change? And if we don't, then we need to upskill our people, right? And so, we've worked with you in this capability space. How do we build the capability of our people in embarking on change? The other part is, what is our process in which the way in which we go about change, right? And what I'm hearing is very much about that Abraham Lincoln quote, which is, if you gave me And to use a tree analogy, right? If you gave me 8 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend 6 hours sharpening my axe. It's about spending that time up front.
Absolutely.
And getting the right buy-in.
Yeah.
We use a systems thinking approach, right, which is really understanding the whole process down to the perspectives of the people, which is exactly what you said. I like the analogy of if we're standing at a street corner and there's a car accident in the middle of the street corner, and Shaun, you're on one corner of this intersection, I'm on the other corner. You and I both saw the exact same car accident, but you saw this little black cat that ran across the road, and I saw the guy in the back seat on his mobile phone, or in the back car on his mobile phone. Both saw the exact same car accident, but from yet a different perspective, and none of us are wrong.
Absolutely.
Right, so it's about drawing out those perspectives, and that's where you get your buy-in, right?
And I think the other thing every CEO should have is the humility. Arrogance is the most dangerous thing you can have as a CEO, because coming back to none of us know, every business is complex.
Yeah.
And in your business are multiple pockets of excellence, subject matter experts on areas that you do not have all the insights and all the knowledge.
Yeah.
So respect people, no matter where they sit in an organization, no matter how low down they are potentially subject matter experts, and they could identify challenges, problems, or obstacles that you may not have thought of.
Yeah.
So that consultation process and identifying all the options and all the risks and consulting, talking to people.
Correct.
Getting their advice, getting the inputs, getting the opinions creates a more consolidated, sound outcome.
Without doubt. Why is it that there are many leaders, I'm not going to point fingers anywhere, but there are many leaders that, when going and embarking on transformational change in their organization, they don't believe in the building of the maturity of the organization in the way in which it receives change. There's a real cultural change, right? Absolutely. It's like, because, we've all been through change, especially in the large corporate space, where, turnover increases, engagement drops, processes and systems are up the wazoo, like no one really knows what's going on. Yes. It effectively costs you more money than what you actually set out to do. So building that change maturity will save you money.
It does, absolutely.
And I just don't understand why. I don't understand. It seems like I'm preaching to the choir with you, but it is very common that there are leaders who are not looking at building the capability of their people. What is your suggestion or your advice to those leaders?
Yeah. So, Daniel, I think the other challenge that we have as companies is that typically companies are good at what they do, based on past experience, but the past is not necessarily predictive of the future.
Correct.
And we may need to adopt new ways and different ways of doing things, or our customers and consumers' expectations may be changing, and they want a different way of being served or supported, or their expectations are changing. So there's an element of also understanding that, but it's coming back to people, and people have skills that are relevant to their jobs. Change management is not a skill that a lot of us have, and as a senior leadership team, or as a CEO and a senior leadership team, you can develop a great vision, and the gap between the vision and where you are is what needs to be filled, and that requires new skills, new competencies. But before you get there, the process of managing change is a skill that a lot of companies don't have and a lot of people don't have. That's where companies like yourself come in. Yep. If you're a large organization and you've got deep pockets and you can afford to build that capability internally, that's great, because it's something, I believe it's a life skill that every CEO and every senior manager should have. So it's something we should train, is change management.
100%.
If you don't have access to that, engage with a company like yourself. Bring in experts who understand change management, because the risks of failure, and your point earlier, exceed the costs.
Without doubt.
Absolutely.
The amount of times we've been called in because we're $2 million over budget, can you come in and help us out? Like it's actually scary in somewhat. Someone I've explained it in a way that, if you, and to your point, you outsource logistics, right?
Yes.
Like, because we're not a company that does logistics, so let's outsource it.
And you're fine with that.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, no worries, we can change it. But when it comes to change, I think it's weird, because it's like, well, we should really know that. Like, that's change is something that I can do, or any one of our people can do. And we're of the attitude is like, we are change experts. We absolutely, our job is to not make you money, but to save you money, right? Like, that's if you treat your people correctly, if you have the right processes and systems in place, if you have the right structures in place in which change is enabled,
Yes.
right, then you're on the right path.
Improve the chances of your change being successful.
Correct.
In a level of magnitude. And I guess the often people can, and some people are good at doing the vision part, but there's always typically, if you do your planning, there's typically a gap between the end state and where you currently are. And managing people through that change management is where most change fails.
Correct.
And then companies fail.
Correct.
So let's not underestimate the importance of change management and change management skills and having a proper process that's founded and rooted in solid theory.
I love it. Do you want a job? Come work for us, Shaun. You'll change the world. Let's keep going through your career. So, I mean, Maslow's hierarchy of needs kicks into place when you decide that Australia is your new home.
Yeah.
Tell us about your journey over here.
Okay, so the good news about the jobs that I had is that I'd reached a point of self-actualization. And how you know when you reach self-actualization is that when somebody comes and offers you a lot more money and you go, no, you know what? I'm actually fulfilled. I'm satisfied. I'm engaged. I'm enthusiastic. I'm passionate. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I don't need the money.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And you can see the fruits of your success,
Yeah.
and people around you engaged, and people around you are successful and they're happy. Then you know that you're at the pinnacle. And I would like to think that I was at that point in South Africa. But what happened is that myself and my family went into what in Australia would be an equivalent is a big W on a Sunday afternoon. And while we were in there, I heard a crack which sounded like a door falling on tiles. But having a military background, I knew what that was.
Someone barging in.
Yeah, and these guys were coming in with guns, and I grabbed my two daughters, and I first ran to behind the counter. And as we got in behind the counter and I pushed them down, I realized I was in the watch and jewelry section. And I knew that it was the absolutely wrong place to be.
That's
because if they're going to hitting a store, that's what they're going to go for. So I grabbed my daughters and I arms around them and my wife, and we ran across the aisle. And these guys were shooting, opening fire. Again, as I said before, everyone screams and falls flat on the floor. And I got into the clothing section, and I was pulling clothes off the racks and covering my daughters and my wife, so that there were bullets and glass fragments were flying all over the place. The guys were shooting, and shells and glass was flying all over, shooting through the shells, and you can imagine the chaos.
Wow.
And my instinct was to get on my phone and phone 000. South Africa's a different number, but same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And South Africa has what they call a flying squad, which is like a SWAT team. And I phoned that number and I said, "There's an armed robbery. It's called Pick and Pay at this Pick and Pay." And the person who took the call was still asking questions, and then she heard gunshots in the background. These guys were on automatic. And she got her commanders on, and I was talking to them, and these guys saw that, so they started shooting at me. So I slid the phone away from me and rolled under one of the centre aisles. But the police arrived very quickly. They say they call them the flying squad because they literally come screaming with sirens, and they trapped these robbers inside. So the police were shooting in at them, and these guys were shooting out at them, and all of us were in the middle.
Jesus.
And this is on a Sunday afternoon, supposedly peaceful Sunday afternoon shopping, and that. So as a result of that, my daughter suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, still till today.
Obviously,
so,
yeah.
Yeah. So what happened is that we realized, and I was a guy who was like, I'm always positive about life, and it'll get better. And I realized it's not getting better; it's getting worse. And South Africa, unfortunately, is the kind of country where you'll stop at a traffic light and someone will smash your window and stick a gun against your head.
Yeah.
You'll be lucky if they don't shoot you and they take your car and drive off, or put you in the boot. And
Yeah, Gabriela's a family and from Brazil. And
Yes.
I've heard the same
Similar.
stories coming.
Absolutely, Sao Paulo,
Yeah.
Rio, similar. Yeah. So she'll understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But it got to a point where I said, okay, this is where that Maslow hierarchy, where safety and security needs start taking priority over self-actualization and everything else. So we made the decision to emigrate, came to Australia. Quite a process to get into Australia, mate.
Yeah, because you were at a certain age, weren't you?
That's
You'd
right.
get
So I
sponsored
was at a
to-
certain age that I was over the 45, which is where you start losing points. So I needed extra points.
But why Australia over any other country in the world?
My
I mean,
sister
you've been
yeah.
to Europe. And,
Yeah, I've been all over. So
Yeah.
there are a couple of considerations.
Yeah.
My sister lives in Canada, and she was very, very keen for us to come there.
Yeah.
and the climate just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Whereas Australia is very much like South Africa.
Yeah, okay.
I've travelled extensively across Australia, and everywhere I've been in Australia looks like somewhere in South Africa. So the country, the culture. Australians are great people. I like the culture. They're engaging. They're friendly. The lifestyle in Australia is great. It's a beautiful country, and it's similar. It's on the same latitude. In fact, the city where I live, Port Elizabeth, is on exactly the same latitude as Adelaide. So it was like moving halfway around the globe, but on the same latitude. Everything else is the same.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And because I was over the age of 45, and you start losing points after that, I was close to 50.
Yeah.
I needed a few extra points. And the South Australian government kindly has skills, and I came on a scarce skills visa. Yeah. And the South Australian government gave me a few extra points. So obviously, I had to live and work in South Australia, and that's how I ended up here.
Beautiful. Now we're going to claim you as one of our own, right?
I'm now proudly an Australian citizen and very proudly a South Australian.
Yeah, excellent. Very good. And so from there, you've moved over. I mean, that's a big move, but obviously a very much needed move for you and your family. Yeah. Everyone's fine now. They're all.
Oh, I love it. We're very happy here.
Yeah.
So my daughters went back during COVID. They were still studying at uni in South Africa. Well, we didn't know what would happen, and they went back in February of 2020 to enroll at the university for the. Yeah. And Scott Morrison closed the borders, and they got locked out. And they were stuck in South Africa for 9 months before we could get them back.
Oh no.
And during that time, with all the lockdowns in South Africa as well, crime spiraled because people had no food, they couldn't work.
And that's where the Omicron started in there as well. Bloody hell.
Yeah, so social security in South Africa is not so great. So people were starving and hungry as a result of lockdowns and not being able to work. So crime spiked and my daughters were stuck there. So they had a bit of a traumatic experience post us moving to Australia, but it sure cured them. I went back to South Africa for my niece's wedding 2 weeks ago. And I said, you want to come with us? No, we're not leaving Australia. No. So, we're very happily ensconced.
Not for us anymore. Yeah. And I am conscious of your time, but so I want to just quickly dive. You did join a company, and this is where we talked about the robotics earlier, yes. About, it was a
HMPS, which is a South Australian company. Literally a stone's throw from my office at Mitsubishi now.
Yeah, great.
At the airport.
At the airport there.
Yeah.
And you took on the role and robotics. I mean, this is where your love of robotics and automation was sort of sprung. I mean, you would have had some love before there, but this just sort of accentuated it a bit more.
Yeah. So I must say that my engagement with robotics started before that. So particularly when I was in the sawmilling industry and we had to do some very rapid and major expansion. Most of the sawmilling equipment, or some of the world's best sawmilling equipment, comes out of Germany and Finland and countries like that. And we actually embraced a fair bit of automation at that time already, which was unusual for South African businesses and part of what gave us a bit of so labour is cheap in South Africa, so most companies tend to
just stick with their labour.
Exactly. Yeah. And with my engagement with those Finnish and German companies, I saw an opportunity in that as well. So we not only doubled the size of our company initially, we grew more after that, but we embraced technology. And I saw the power of technology and what it can do. And I mean, even in the forestry industry, and I'm going back probably 15, 20 years now, a lot of trees in South Africa were still felled with chainsaws. Now, that's a lot quicker than than Abraham Lincoln's axe you were talking about. But when you're felling trees with a chainsaw, and there's technology out there, and we used to call them fella bunches in those days, and we bought technology in from the United States because they were the best in that space, and we brought in these big John Deeres, and this thing would grab a big tree and cut it off in seconds, and grab 4, 5, or 6 trees in the time that one human couldn't even cut down a tree in a chainsaw.
I've seen a YouTube clip on that, and it strips all
absolutely, and cuts to the right lengths as well.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And all of that happens in minutes.
Yeah, I find that therapeutic watching that. No, that's not. I mean,
so what
in the forestries.
Yeah,
right?
so I talk a lot about the manufacturing inside, but even all the way back into our primary industry, which is forestry, the embracing of technology allowed us to significantly improve our productivity and profitability as a business. So coming back to this company in Adelaide, and I think that's the opportunity for us as Australia, is the opportunity, and we worked primarily with food processing companies, like a couple of big ones around the country, but milk industry, food packaging processing, putting a lot of automation and robotics into that. What it does is it would enable and allow Australia to compete on the world stage and to compete against low-cost countries. So we tend to think that manufacturing is dead in Australia because all our costs are too high. But if we embrace technology, we can improve our efficiencies and our productivity that much that we can actually compete with low labor cost countries. And it allows us to retain and maintain a level of manufacturing in this country that allows people not to do mundane, dark and dirty work, but better skilled, higher quality work, earn better money, and allow us to still do manufacturing in this country. So there are, again, through my exposure to that and my ability to share that with some other companies, we can use technology in ways that we haven't thought before.
Which is what you're doing at Mitsubishi now. So from my understanding, you joined Mitsubishi after a couple of years as CEO at the HMPS, and you were director of after sales, which, and from that, did such a remarkable job that you became one of the fastest ever promotions to a CEO in Mitsubishi's history. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. Yeah. So I was very fortunate. So one of the things that I realized coming to Australia and being an unknown factor, it's quite an interesting thing, and Gabrielle will know, she's an immigrant as well. When you immigrate, you lose everything. You lose your history, you lose your culture, you lose your friends, you lose your family, you lose everything. You come to a new country in an unknown quantity, and a lot of the companies, and they're fairly large companies in other countries, are not even known. I mean, I'm talking about Pick n Pay, which is a retailer the same size as Coles or even bigger. Yeah. Unknown in Australia. So if you worked for Pick n Pay, you said, I work for Pick n Pay, I go, who's that?
Who's that? You got to say Big W, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's why I use the Big W reference to go, that benchmarks things in people's minds. So what I did realize is I would have to, and I'd been a CEO and COO for many, many years, 10, 15, 20 years before that. But I took a step back and took the director of after sales role to get back into a large size organization. And my entire career has been in big corporates, big companies. So I find myself comfortable in that space. I wanted to get back into that. So I took the director of after sales role, and we set about changing a few things about the way we did things, and was remarkably successful, fortunately. And
well, I think you changed from after sales and you made it pre-sales, didn't you? Like you spec up the car at the start.
Yeah, exactly. So that
seems so simple.
Yeah. So that's one example, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But after sales, we set after sales on a new path, and that was in 27, and we're about now 4 or 5 years ago. And after sales in Mitsubishi, and I guess this is what putting in the right systems and processes, creating sustainability. It's not about the individual. It's about building the processes and the systems and building the skills and the strengths and the capability. So
correct.
If I rewind for a moment, the company that I worked for in South Africa is still wildly successful even till today. So if you put in the right processes and systems and you upskill people, you embed that, it becomes the new way of doing business. Yeah. It's like that spinning wheel. It takes hard work to get it spinning, and once it's going, you just need to maintain the momentum. And it's like that with after sales in Mitsubishi. Since I've joined till today, it's just on a steep growth trajectory ever since. And I'll give you the example that you mentioned as one of the ways in how we flipped our way of thinking. Now, in the motor industry, it's called after sales, and it's typically because it's things that you sell after you've bought the car.
Yeah.
And that's the way.
So after I spent $50,000, do you want to spend $5,000 more? It's like, well, exactly. I don't have that money.
Yeah, exactly. So what you do is typically, and a large part of after sales is accessories. Yeah. And in Australia, that's big business. So you sell a ute, a Triton, and then people start adding accessories. Yeah. And they customize it and they personalize it and they add all the stuff, and that's after sales, and it's added after the sale, and it's revenue for the company. But one of the opportunities for us, or one of the challenges for us, was that we wanted to extend our model range, and what we wanted to do is, instead of letting the customer add all these accessories afterwards, is to actually build them into the vehicle up front. Yeah. So instead of after sales, making it pre-sales. And we went so far as we actually used a package of accessories, which we put onto a Triton, that we actually created a distinctive model called GSR. And we added all the accessories up front. We put the roll tops on, and we put the roll bars on, and we put the bull bars on, and we put the fender and we put it all on up front, and we created a new model called the GSR. Yeah.
And people bought it.
And the people bought it, and it's financed at the same. So it's part of the vehicle. It's all financed within your finance. You don't have to go and take out $5,000 or $6,000 or $10,000 afterwards to add this stuff. It's actually all built into the vehicle.
Fabulous.
And it becomes a distinctive model. So it's a different way of thinking. It's flipping it over and making it pre-sales, not after sales. And there's many things that we did. That's just one example of many of those.
And then you got the nod in March 2020.
Yeah, that was very interesting. So I was interviewed and during the March of 2020 for the CEO role. And that's after I'd been in the after sales role for about 8.5 months.
Yeah.
And was successful. I got the job and was put into the role. Well, I was told that I was successful on the 15th of March. And on the 20th of March that year, Scott Morrison announced we're shutting the country down.
Bloody hell.
And okay.
I'm getting post-traumatic stress thinking about it.
We've all forgotten about COVID now, but I remember the chairman of the dealer council phoning me and saying, I was going to congratulate you, but I'm going to commiserate. You're taking on, and I took on the role of CEO from the 1st of April during a total lockdown, during a shutdown. And I guess, again, my previous experience.
Yeah, I mean, you've dealt with recessions.
Absolutely. So that's the other advantage of having worked in countries.
You'd be one of the very rare that would have dealt with the 2008 recession.
Well, that's fortunate in that not only the 2008 recession. So the South African economy is a lot more volatile than many other stable, mature economies. So we it's a lot more cyclical, and you have a lot more depressions and recessions and downturns than you would in a place like Australia. I think at the time Australia hadn't seen a recession for 27 years or something.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
So I had, through the exposure that I'd had, been exposed to some fairly significant things. So I guess that helped a lot because people went into panic stations, that, as is a normal response. What are we going to do now? We can't sell cars. We shut down. Dealers can't sell cars. How are we going to survive as a company? What are we going to do? And it was really, how do we pivot? How do we find the opportunity in adversity? And that was getting people into boardrooms and going, okay, slow down, stop. Pause, let's talk this through. What are we going to do? What is known? What is unknown? And I mean, at the time we did lots of things like, if people can't fetch their cars, they can't go to a dealer, can't fetch a car, we need to get online, and we need to get online fast. And how do we provide opportunities for people, 3D configurators, to see the car, to spin it, to turn it this way, that way, add accessories, look at what the car costs, buy the car online. How do we create virtual tours, virtual experiences for car buying experiences? How do we create virtual deliveries? You don't need to go to a dealer. How do we deliver the cars to people's homes? How do we start servicing? And then some of the lockdowns were lifted, but only emergency people could. And how do we service their cars at home? How do we keep their cars on the... Yeah, so we did a lot of things. We pivoted very rapidly, and that was good for us. Because instead of sitting back and going, oh, the end of the world has come, let's go into the corner and cover ourselves.
We're moving into a new world.
Absolutely. How do we lean into that? How do we embrace technology? How do we create new systems? How do we create new processes? How do we respond to this? How do we keep our business alive? So we did a lot of things. We fast-tracked a lot of things that we knew were coming in the future that we had to do straight away.
How did you keep people calm in that time, though? I think, like, you talked about leadership. Like, everyone, just hold on.
Yeah.
Calm your farm. How did you...
I think that's the job of leadership.
Yeah.
My mother used to... you talked about influence of parents in life, and she said, when all others around you are losing their heads, that's the time to keep your head.
Yeah.
And that's what a good leader does. He said, when everyone else is panicking, is to keep their head. And a lot of that is doing exactly what I said. Slow it down. Slow it down. Just stay calm, guys. Let's sit together. Let's talk this through. Let's work this through. Let's appeal to the logical. Let's talk to the left side of the brain. Find facts. Talk to that. So it's shifting people away from the emotional side of your brain to the logical side of your brain. And that's your job as a leader.
And can you explain how you go about that and how you work? I mean, directly with your leadership team.
Yes.
Because accountability comes into this as well. How do you hold people accountable yet keeping them focused on what you're actually now trying to do?
Yeah.
I think it's like, I use this example. I've said this before, and I think what you're saying is very similar to this example. I went to Fiji recently, and was on the boat. Like, we went out to one of the islands, and on the way back, it started raining. Like, it was chaos. It was a big yacht. Sails going everywhere. Wind was blowing. Rain was going everywhere. There was about 50 people on this yacht. Staff are running around everywhere trying to get everything. And people are covering bags. So it was like a bit chaotic. And I look over and I look over at the captain, and he's standing there behind the big steering wheel, calm as ever, looking off into the distance, going, "That's where I'm going," right? And like, I instantly just felt calm, right? Just by his demeanor. And it's kind of like what you're saying is this ability to stay calm.
Yes.
That's a skill set. Like, that's really...
It is.
That's really tough. And then not to mention holding other, I mean, you've said it time and time again, surround yourself with extremely intelligent people. So holding other extremely intelligent and great people accountable and calm as well, I think it's, not to mention the rest of the organization, I think it's just this layer cake. And it's I think you've been through a lot that you're able to do that. What's your advice for those who aren't that experienced in their job?
So I'm going to rewind all the way back to my youth.
Yeah.
Because as I said earlier, my life, everything in life prepares you for the next thing in life. So my military experience at the age of 17, 18 gave me the opportunity, and the military do this. So before you ever are in battle and under live fire, you're actually under friendly live fire. So they literally, you will leopard crawl through, and they'll take a machine gun and shoot over the top of you, and you'll leopard crawl through under barbed wire with your pack, with your rifle. You will simulate, you will practice. And so South African Army had an expression, train hard, fight easy. So using those experiences stand you in good stead later in life, because you always have that as a benchmark and going, is this worse than that? No. This is not worse than that.
I need to stay calm.
So I think leadership is also about creating perspective. Now I want to come back to your captain analogy. The reason that captain was calm and he had his demeanor was because he knew of the capability of that vessel. He knew what that vessel was capable of. So that starts all the way back into it's designed for, it's built for, it can do this. But then he's probably been in other storms. He's been exposed before. He knows what that and that's for me about life experience. That's why I go out there and get as many experiences as I can, because everything in life prepares you for something else. So it starts in the logic and in the fact, and in training and in experience and in skill. And I know that this vessel is capable of doing this and it can withstand that. And I know how to navigate, and I don't need this, and I can do that, and I can navigate with my compass. I can do these things. So a lot of that is about equipping yourself up front with the necessary skill, the expertise, and that's why I continue to train and learn and go to universities and study and attend programs. It's all about equipping yourself to deal with a wide variety of things. And it extends into your leadership team. So it's having your leadership team expose themselves, get trained, get experienced. And each of them is a subject matter expert in their own right. So again, if you're in the military and you're going into a particular situation, you know that I have in my small group, I have a gunnery expert, I have a signals expert, I have a medic. If this situation happens, and a lot of them have a guy that's embedded. So if we get in there and I need artillery, I've got a guy who can call up artillery, who can position them, and I know he's not going to put the bomb on our head. Or I know that I can call up air assets, and I have somebody who can talk to that pilot and can give that pilot the info.
It's trust.
So it's quality training, it's trust, it's skills, it's expertise, and it's about, as a leader, it's about bringing that all together. And in those times of crisis, that's when things really get tested to the ultimate. And it's about keeping a calm, clear head.
So do you ever get stressed?
I do. I think it would be abnormal for anybody not to suffer stress. But then it's always about, okay, this is the situation, this is what's happening, I've seen this before, this is what's happened, or I haven't seen this before, so what do I need to equip myself with, what do I need to do? So it's trying to shift yourself from that adrenaline-driven animal brain into the left logic. It's about...
How quickly do you notice the trigger of stress? And what do you normally do? You talk about left brain, and is there something that you do that you like? Do you meditate? Do you go, right, I got to deep breathe here, or
So deep breathing is a good box breathing. So
box breathing. 4-4-4-4.
That's 4-4-4.
Yeah.
Hold it. 4-4-4. Breathe out. 4-4-4.
Yeah.
And that physiologically, and interesting enough, I was at Oxford earlier this year, doing a high performance leadership program, and guess what? One of the things, they actually had a professor talking about box breathing, because it's been proven, and there's lots of research around it, that the physiology of box breathing slows your breathing, forces you to calm down, helps your brain stabilize and focus and recenter.
Think logically.
So it's absolutely. So it's using skills, techniques to create that, ground yourself, earth yourself, calm yourself, force yourself to think logically, slow down your heartbeat, slow down your pulse rate, focus.
It's hard though.
It's hard.
Like
hard.
it's really hard, and especially when you're always staring at numbers that don't tell you the story that you want to see, right?
Don't panic.
Yeah, I think
Don't
it's the unknown. I mean, look, I am an entrepreneur and I've started this business. It's just this constant unknown of what's coming next, and how do you prepare? And I'm green in the sense that I don't have the experience of being a CEO any other business. So I'm actually just learning as I go here.
Well, it may be different for other people, but for myself, to be honest, I have sleepless nights. I wake up at 2:00 in the morning, things going around in my mind, going around in my brain. That's not a good time to think.
No.
Because things kind of magnify and amplify themselves.
Correct.
So, to say that it's all happy sailing is not for me anyway. That wouldn't be honest. There are stressful periods. There are stressful times. And these grey hairs are earned. Being a CEO is a stressful job.
You got grey hairs at least. Mine fell out. Right, we've almost hit the 2-hour mark. I think we're about the 2-hour mark now. 10 minutes away. Well, we're going to hit the 2-hour mark. So, I do want to ask just one more question. I feel like we could speak for 3 or 4 hours, but family is one thing that is so dear to me and core to my existence. And then, and you mentioned earlier the move here to Australia to keep your family safe. You also mentioned earlier that your daughters were 8 and 10, and they didn't really know whether their dad was coming home from work, and you're away for a while. One thing that I've learned is that I'm trying to achieve something that is my vision. It's not my family's vision. It's not my children's vision. It's my vision of what I want to create. And yet, at the same time, I'm trying to cultivate a loving and thriving family life. I find it difficult in the sense that I'm passionate about both things.
Yes.
And I just continuously clash in a sense, and from my decision-making point of view. How do you manage that thought? It seems to me as if you're now so much more family-focused than maybe your early years, so you've learned some things or two. So how do you manage that now? What's your thought process?
So Daniel, to me, my family is just as important.
Yeah.
And so important that I made, and if I could say that with Coca-Cola, I was flying, and I was flying high, and my career was on a rocket trajectory, and I was doing very well.
Yeah.
But I made a very significant decision to change my lifestyle, very significantly, because the company that I then joined I'd been in global roles and traveling multiple countries all over the world, living in fancy hotels, flying on aeroplanes, having a great life. My family were at home alone, and I had these daughters who were 8 and 10 who hadn't, as I said, have a father who worked a regular day. At that point in life, I did a reset, and I took a job with a South African-based company, which involved very little at that point. It changed eventually. Very little global or international travel, and it was a serious adjustment. It was a serious adjustment, but for me, the integrity of the family and keeping the family together and whole was more important than the career. So I've made some big calls. Coming to Australia was for safety and security. It was for giving my family a safe environment, but also for giving my daughters a future. And I think Australia has a lot of future and a lot of opportunity, and it was creating that opportunity for them. If I have to be honest, I earned at that point a lot less money in Australia than I was earning in South Africa.
No doubt.
So I had to make some material, financial sacrifices. But that balancing is always challenging. And even now with the role that I have, I'm doing a fair amount of traveling. It's very important that the time I have with my family is high quality, high value time. And there was a bit of adjustment for my wife as well, because as you said, it was my goals and my aspirations and my career. And at a point in time, the family felt like they were being left out of those plans, and they weren't part of those plans. So what we do is create one very significant quality family time together, when I'm in the country, and I turn down lots of social invitations and invitations so that I can spend that quality time to rebuild with the family. And then the other thing that we do is we all like travel, we global citizens, is that we have family holidays. Now, COVID interrupted that for 2 or 3 years, and at the moment, one of my daughters is knee-deep in a PhD in mathematics, and the other one's knee-deep in a master's in psychology, so they're both writing dissertations at the moment.
Yeah, wow.
But early next year, we'll be doing another overseas. So we used to do lots of overseas families. So one advantage of flying all over the world is you get a bit of Voyager miles or frequent flyer miles, and we redeem those and help to create special family holidays that are memorable and that we use as a base, as a reference, as a foundation.
And a recharge.
That's right, yeah.
No, I love it. I think, I think your life isn't complete unless you got that.
For me, family is critical.
Yeah,
as I said, I've made some very significant life decisions around family.
You have. So just some closing thoughts before we get into some what, if you were to encapsulate your entire journey of up to date in one lesson or one message, what do you think that would be?
Life's an echo. What you put in is what you get back. I live life at 110%. I put everything into it. If I have a job, I pour my enthusiasm, my engagement, my passion. I'm totally focused, and life gives back. Whatever you put in, you get back.
I love it. What excites you about the future?
The future, my mother had another expression. The future is like a field of snow, like a field of driven snow. You can go wherever you want. You can make your own footprints, and you can go wherever you want. Life is in your hands. You can make of life what you want of it. The future is exciting and full of opportunity, and you need to create your own opportunities.
Yeah, I love it. Rightio, some quick fire questions just to round off the conversation. We're big readers here. What are you reading right now?
What I'm reading right now is the opportunities of commercializing artificial intelligence.
Oh.
So right now,
is that a book or is that
it's very interesting. It's a McKinsey study
report,
that they've done, and it's really about looking at it from a business point of view. What are the opportunities for us? And if I had to say what's the single biggest emerging technology, it's AI.
Without doubt.
And AI at this point, and there's a lot of debate around the world, is there's high risk with AI depending on where you go and how you use it. But there's also significant opportunity in AI. And what are those opportunities? How can we commercialize them, and how can we apply them to make our lives quicker, faster, better, and easier?
Brilliant. What's one self-development book that you feel that stands out from the rest?
I think the book that had the single biggest impact on my life when I was a young senior executive at a young age. I read the book From Good to Great by Jim Collins when I was in that significant transformation that we were doing at Coca-Cola. So there I was sitting very early 30s, senior executive, looking at the significant transformation of an organization across the continent of Africa. And I was looking for guidance and ideas. And the book by Jim Collins, From Good to Great, was very significant and still stands out as one of the most significant reads.
Do you still revert to it these days?
Yeah, occasionally.
Well, you mentioned the flywheel before.
That's right.
What is one lesson that's taken you the longest to learn?
I have an agile and a quick brain, so I engage mouth before I engage brain sometimes.
Yeah.
So the lesson that I've really taken the longest to learn is to, as my mother used to say, is think twice as slowly as you speak.
Yeah.
I mean, speak twice as slowly as you think. Think more, speak less.
Yeah, you got 2 ears, 1 mouth sort
That's
of thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Do you, I'm just going to divert one real quick and just ask you, like, you're a very, like you said, quick thinker and agile thinker and probably have the ability to see things quicker than what most people do. How do you hold yourself in a moment where you have to let the other people see what you already see?
If you had asked me what one of my biggest frustrations in life is that I have to slow myself all the way back and spend a lot of time explaining what to me seems obvious. And so that is one of the biggest lessons in life is to succeed. You need to bring other people along with you.
Yeah.
They need to get to the same insights as you, and not that you're necessarily right. And also listening to their inputs and their ideas along the way. So forcing yourself to slow down and to step back and to slow the process and give time for consultation, because that's the way you get buy-in, and that's the way you get understanding, and that's the way you get other inputs and insights that are quite important to formulating a good opinion.
Absolutely. If you could have a coffee or tea with with a current or historical figure, who would it be?
That would actually be, I think, your namesake, a guy called Daniel.
Yeah?
So Daniel is a figure, it's a book in the Bible.
Yeah.
And Daniel...
The lions then.
That's right,
yeah.
yes. But Daniel, and that's not the aspect of Daniel I like, was that it said that Daniel, and this was the testimony of the king at the time, Nebuchadnezzar, he said he has the Spirit of God in him, he has deep insight and deep knowledge, and he's filled with wisdom. I'd like to spend time with that guy, getting more understanding on how to get more and deeper insights and more wisdom.
Well, you just did 2 hours. No, very good.
Thank you, Daniel.
What is some of the best advice that you've ever received?
Probably from my father. He would say, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing properly.
Yeah.
So if you do something, put your mind to it, put your heart to it, and it's worth doing properly.
Don't do it half-assed, absolutely.
Exactly.
What's one habit that holds you back the most?
Engaging mouth too quickly.
Yeah, the same one.
So probably that.
Yeah.
It's really about, as I said, my mind works quickly, and I tend to just blurt it out there and let's go and let's make it happen. So I'm very much a let's make it happen person.
Yeah.
And it's about...
That's because you've already seen what can happen,
That's
right?
right, but it's about remembering that other people don't necessarily get it as quickly as you do, and you need to bring them along in the process.
Which is one of my questions, which is what frustrates you the most, which you've already answered.
Yes. So, although the other frustration I have in life is more mundane, and that's traffic.
Oh, yeah.
What a waste of life sitting in traffic.
Doesn't make sense, does it? If you could pay someone to do one of your chores, what would it be? What chore would it be?
Growing up as a kid, we had a large property, and my dad was a farmer. Large property with lots of grass to be cut. I used to hate cutting the grass, even when it was on a ride-on mower. It used to take hours to do it. I guess in a modern day context, washing cars and washing cups, coffee cups. Luckily, we have machines to do both.
Yes, absolutely. What's one word that you hate?
It can't be done is 3 words, so it's impossible. I hate the words it can't or it's impossible.
Impossible. It's very funny that
there's nothing that's impossible.
That's right. It's very funny that we have the same like our parents have said the same thing. It's probably very common, but you're the first person that I've met that has repeated that back at me. So what's the first thing that you would do if you became invisible?
If I became invisible, I think I would travel around the world to all the sites that have nuclear bombs and change the codes so that they couldn't blow up the world.
That's brilliant.
Given all what's happening in the world and the socio-political crises and
it's scary,
all the latent threat of nuclear around, and I'm not talking about nuclear as an energy source, I'm talking nuclear as a destructive force as a bomb. I would go and turn all of those off. I'd scramble the codes for them.
Yeah. Yes. It's a scary thought. What's the most useless talent that you have?
When I was at school, we had to take one vocational subject, and I took woodwork. So I learned to make furniture. I learned to be a carpenter, and I learned to make furniture. And I've never made a piece of furniture since I left school. So it's a latent, useless talent.
Right. Now, my favourite question of the whole podcast, what's your best dad joke?
Well, if you had to ask my daughters, they'd say there's no best dad joke. They're all bad.
They're all horrible. I've seen a video clip, right, on YouTube or whatever it is, just where like they they interview these kids, and it's like with the somber music,
Yes.
and like they're going through hardship,
Yeah.
and it's about the
Dad-
bad dad jokes.
well, seeing as we're talking about bad dad jokes, and seeing as you want a dad joke, what did the baby corn say to the mama corn?
What did the baby corn say to the mama
Mama
corn?
corn, where's popcorn?
That's horrible.
It is horrible. It's meant to be horrible.
It's great.
And it's a dad joke.
It's so bad, it's good. I love it. Look, thank you so much for your time today, Shaun. It's been an absolute privilege to sit here with you and learn more about you and your career and your life and some of the things that you've gone through. And I think I speak on behalf of everyone. It is an amazing career, and you've seen some things in your life that I don't think some people, especially here in Australia, will ever see. So thank you for sharing us and giving us a different perspective on what that world, our bigger world, looks like. And kudos to everything that you and the team at Mitsubishi are doing. I know you've turned it into one of the most profitable Mitsubishi in the world. And you guys are going from strength to strength off the back of the work you and your team are doing. So kudos.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to be here. I live life on fast forward, and life has given me lots of enjoyment and satisfaction, and I really had a great ride so far. So thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thanks, everyone, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the podcast all. You can check out the show notes if there was anything of interest to you, and find out more about us at SynergyIQ.com.au. I am going to ask, though, if you did like the podcast, it would absolutely mean the world to me if you could subscribe, rate, and review. And if you didn't like it, that's all right too. There's no need to do anything. Take care, guys. All the best.